Hello, I'm here today to talk to you about something that's very special to my heart, the power of ericksonian hypnotherapy. Now, I've been in the field and been in clinical practice for over 55 years. When I started, the field was only Freudian analysis, and I've been lucky to be trained not only by the people that Freud sent to train us in psychoanalysis, but by Laura Pearls and Jay Marino and so many of the innovators in the field of psychology. And about 30 years ago, I discovered Milton Erickson. Now, everything that I know, which is, I'm working on my 20th modality, I still use within the context of an Ericksonian framework, because the Ericksonian framework gives you tremendous power. When I say power, it empowers you to provide an environment in which your client finds the path for healing themselves. This is very important. Erickson said, and I certainly have applied it to myself and to the students that we train, you really want to be better at what you're doing. And I believe that most coaches that I meet, and NLP practitioners and psychologists and psychoanalysts and psychotherapists, people who want to be really effective in their communication, I think we all want to be better and better at it. And part of the power of Erickson's work is it really enables you to take the next step and the next step and this next step. Because when Erickson was asked, what makes you the best, or would make you the best psychotherapist, Ericksonian hypnotherapist, he said, know yourself, know yourself, know yourself. But let me expand on that a little bit. Ericksonian work requires, so you have to make a commitment. It's not, oh, in 4 days I'll learn how to do this. If you're interested in that, you don't really have to watch the rest of what I'm saying. But if you're really interested in developing yourself into a healing instrument, that you become a healing presence, and it's not so much the brilliance of what you say, but it's the environment of being what I call a pathfinder. The Ericksonian hypnotherapist is a pathfinder. He or she finds a path where there is no path. And the path that you help your client find is the path that they are going to find and travel. You create the environment. So, besides the power being you, because I've become a fine tuning fork, I see every day of the week clients on the internet from all over the world, from all different cultures, and my work is extremely effective. One of the things that Erickson said, when you really train and develop yourself in my work and become an Ericksonian hypnotherapist, you will automatically have confidence. When a new client comes in and presents themselves, you will feel, I can work with this, I know this, I am confident. And that confidence, authentic confidence, is immediately communicated to that client. I've never had a client come in for one session and never come back. Because in that first session as an Ericksonian, now, they may be hysterical about what's happening to them. They may not believe that they can achieve what they can achieve. Let me give you an example. I had a client who called me, and I hadn't seen him since he was 12. He was now in his mid-30s, and he was in tears. And he said, Stephen, I know you're in Sao Paulo and I'm in California, but I've just been diagnosed as borderline, and they want to put me in behavioristic therapy, and I think I am borderline, but I feel so hopeless. So I sat back, and then, and this is an Ericksonian intervention, I said, wait a minute. I know you, you know me, I know you and worked with you for 3 years, from 12 to 15, so I know a very special part of you. The problem you've had your whole life is that everybody tries to structure you into somebody that they want instead of who you are trying to become. So he said, yes, but I'm borderline. And I said, well, what do you mean by borderline? Do you mean that one minute you're feeling happy and then the next minute you crash and you're angry at somebody, and the next minute you're feeling, no, I'm just being paranoid, and then you sort of numb out and detach? And he said, yeah, borderline. I said, no. You really have trouble regulating your emotions and your feelings. That we can handle. Who needs that label? Emotions that go like that, we can deal with that. And since we already have a connection, let's give it a try. We'll have a few sessions. If it isn't doing what it should do for you, then of course, I'll help you find the best treatment that you can get in California. I'm so happy to share this with you because he would no longer be diagnosed as borderline. What he said to me is, oh yeah, I can still see the borderline stuff come up, but I'm in charge of it now. I see those aspects of myself. And we began work that in less than a year, he would not be diagnosed as borderline. This is the power of Ericksonian hypnosis. And the power comes from really not just rapport. You'll hear that all the time. Oh, great rapport. This is rapport. You'll hear, oh, we have a connection. It's more than, it's an engagement. This is an engagement. It's two people, and this is what makes it powerful, co-creating. Now, if I'm co-creating from my intellect and you're co-creating from your memory and your intellect, we're not going to make much progress because it's explicit to explicit. And lots of studies done at Princeton, at Yale, at Harvard have said all healing that takes place that's beneficial for the client is implicit to implicit. So one of the things that I have developed is the methodology to teach you to go from your explicit into your implicit, that inner deep sense that exists in your non-conscious mind of the felt meaning of something that you've said explicitly up here, but it's much more complex here. And as you tune into your implicit, which is 95% of what allows you or allows your client to change, that implicit automatically leads you to connect to, and there are methods for helping the client to use their implicit to connect to yours. Now, it's implicit to implicit, and the power of Ericksonian hypnosis goes even further. The client has the implicit and begins, they formulate, not you, because you don't know the client as well as the client knows the client. Only the client is the expert on the client. That's Ericksonian, and it's true. They go from their implicit and they formulate a new functional, healthy, explicit, that allows them to take the next step and the next step, positive step in their life. That's part of the power. Now, one of the other exciting things that makes it so powerful, because I hear all the time, oh, there's this type of hypnosis and this classical hypnosis. Oh, yes, there's Ericksonian. And I would say, well, first of all, there's no such thing as Ericksonian hypnosis, because trance is trance. Or classical hypnosis, trance is trance. So no matter what, the important thing is, what is your attitude? What is your belief? What is the way within you that you approach, and what's your philosophy to creating a relational field with that client that allows them to use trance, for they are responsible for making the changes in their life. So that's why I said you are the pathfinder that finds a path where there is no path, and that lets the client enter into the path they need to travel for their own healing. Also, when you think of the other types, or I think of the other types of hypnosis, you've probably heard this, but I don't know if you really hear it. Ericksonian hypnosis is based on psychology. It's based on neurology. It's based on learning theory, how we learn what we learn. It's based on biochemistry. It's based on the messages and healing that's available if we perceive it in our bodies. And it's a systemic point of view. It's not just a problem, it's within the client's whole systemic world, their family, their community, their culture, their nation. All of this impacts, and that's the basic position of Ericksonian hypnosis. Classical hypnosis is not based on psychology, it's not based on neurology, it's not based on learning theory, it's not, none of the other forms of hypnosis are based in the tremendous amount of information we have since Freud. Freud is 125 years ago. For instance, the power of Ericksonian hypnosis is when we say, trust your unconscious, because we now know that 95% of all change starts in the unconscious. When I first heard this, I said, oh my God, trust my unconscious, this wonderful, horrible, awful cauldron of impulses and sexual instincts and aggression. But that's the Freudian view. And Freud himself, and believe me, I know because I was taught by the people he sent to teach us, Freud himself said, this is my theory, but research and practice, clinical practice, will prove it true or not true in time. Well, we know that the unconscious mind he described is not the unconscious mind, or what I call now the non-conscious, so we don't confuse it with that. Erickson said, and research supports it, that the non-conscious mind is all about our evolution, step by step, so that we can become who we were meant to become. Step by step, evolving ourselves. So, part of the power of Ericksonian hypnosis is I can trust when I connect into my non-conscious mind that I have a tremendous positive warehouse of information that's there and designed to help me find the way to further evolve myself. Something else that's kind of important, we know over and over again, and this is not disputed, that all other forms of hypnosis, they're effective with about 10% of the population for a period of time. With Ericksonian hypnosis, it's effective 100% of the time with no negative side effects. Now, not necessarily with the same hypnotherapist, because two people really have to meet and connect and work together. But I've been asked so many times, describe the difference between classical and Erickson's work, classical hypnosis. And my feeling is, why would I describe the difference? One is very authoritarian and direct, the other is non-authoritarian and indirect. It's a tremendous difference in how you perceive the power of healing, and whether you perceive that the client has that capacity. It's not the capacity of the therapist, but the capacity within the client. But more important, this is my own personal interest. Why would I want to work with something that is only 10% success? You know, I've been working in this field for 55 years. Can you imagine 55 years of ineffective work? I'd commit suicide. I've learned to become more and more and more effective. And that's the power of Ericksonian hypnosis. It has enabled me in my own personal life to become more and more effective, and with my clients. Now, if you want to believe in the illusion, oh, come have 1 or 2 hypnotic sessions and you'll be cured, please. This is not the place for you, because do you really believe that? How many years did it take you to get into the situation you're currently trying to get out of? Human beings don't heal that way. Nothing works that way. You have to be committed, and you have to work at it, and you have to evolve it. Now, I can tell you, having been a classical analyst and a Freudian analyst for more than the first 15 years of my life, and seeing clients 4 and 5 times a week on the couch for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, Ericksonian work is much faster. Much faster. But the important part is that alliance that you form with the client. I want to also point out there are negative side effects, definite negative side effects with classical hypnosis, because classical hypnosis is authoritarian. Classical hypnosis, the authority is in the hypnotherapist, and you are directly told what the hypnotherapist thinks you need to do. All of us are much more aware today of psychological trauma. The worst thing you can do with psychological trauma is be directive, be authoritarian, be controlling, etc. It triggers all the deep fears of a traumatized person. And we're beginning to see that people are traumatized a lot. And in today's world with the pandemic, trauma. So there are negative side effects, because the central nervous system, and something that we'll be teaching you about, the polyvagal system, immediately says, wait a minute, this is dangerous. I have no autonomy here, and I'm being controlled, and I'm powerless. That's the core of trauma. You were powerless to do anything, and the entire system becomes resistant. And there's no way of interpreting that resistance that's going to go away, because it's automatic, it's in your central nervous system. And Ericksonian work doesn't cause that kind of resistance. Now, let me give you an example. I have a client, and it works cross-culturally. This client happens to be Muslim and female, and from Southeast Asia. she's had a lot of trauma. And she said to me, I'm so tired of being triggered by my trauma. I really want to do something. Can you give me something to do that will help speed up my work? Well, one of the great things about Erickson's work and the power is that you design specific homeworks, experiences. It's an invitation to an experience for the client to experience doing something, a homework, and then reflect on it, because it's the experience when they're more or less regulated, and then an awareness, and then a contemplation that allows the client to begin to sense their next step. You don't have to worry about telling them. First of all, they know well before you do. But so I said to her, okay, what's the biggest difficulty with all the traumas? She said, I can think of 5 or 6. And as soon as I start thinking about them, I'm triggered. So I said, okay, take a piece of drawing paper, label the first trauma, and then I want you to draw it. Any way you can. It can be very childlike. Don't worry. You don't have to be Leonardo da Vinci or Frida Kahlo. Just draw it. And then put into the drawing anything that would help you to deal with what you've drawn. Maybe you want to put in a guardian angel. Maybe you have a friend who's been very helpful. Maybe you want to choose somebody from history. So she understood the homework very well, and she was very excited about doing it. In the next session, we were online. The first thing she said to me, I didn't do the homework. So I said, oh, that's okay. Were you able to attempt? She said, as soon as I chose the drawing papers and got everything out, just the idea that there were these 5, 6, 7, 8 traumas, it triggered everything. And I said, no. And I just didn't do it. I'm sorry. Now notice what I said. How wonderful. You knew, or something in you knew, that while what I had suggested could be beneficial, it wasn't beneficial for you. In fact, it was going to trigger too much. So something in you was so wise. You always empower the client. You point out not necessarily, oh yeah, that's a problem, you didn't do the homework, but you point out, how wise of you. I think we have to co-create something better that works for you. She said, I didn't make a mistake. I said, make a mistake? You were terrific. You said, I don't want to be triggered again. I'm not doing this. Because automatically it began to bubble up. So she said, wow, what do we do now? I said, well, let's experiment. Is it all right for you to close your eyes? She said, yes. I said, I want you to imagine any aspect of one traumatic experience. Just nod your head when you have that. And notice I'm doing hypnosis online. If you're connected heart to heart, if you have to put a lot of energy out, but I can teach you because I've been doing online work for more than 30 years. I started with telephone and I worked with faxes. And now we have the internet, which does make it a bit easier. I said, okay, does that aspect of the trauma, does it have a color? She nodded. Does it have a texture? She nodded. Does it have a shape? She nodded, and I could see from her breathing that she was not being triggered. I said, okay, now open your eyes, shake that all off, and she did. I said, now close your eyes again. I want you to imagine that the trauma has been resolved. However that's happened, the trauma has found a resolution. Does that have a color? She nodded. Does that have a shape? She nodded. Does that have a texture? She nodded. I said, great. Now I want you to go back to the color, shape, and texture of the trauma, or aspect of the trauma. Can you do that? She nodded. And slowly begin moving it like a pendulum toward the color, shape, and texture of the resolution. But stop the moment you sense that this is as far as I can move it right now. And that's okay. She said, it's going from black and dense. And she said, and the okay resolution is kind of like a beautiful blue fog. She said, a little corner of the black is turning into it's blue fog. And then she stopped. And I said, how's that? She said, wonderful. I said, I don't know. Notice the power's in the client. This is the power of Ericksonian work. I don't know, but you will know if each day visit that aspect of the trauma. And the goal isn't to get it to resolution. The goal is to just move it in that direction. And you will sense in totality how far you can go before you say, that's enough. And when you say, just like you just did, no, there's just a little corner and that's enough right now, then I want you to think of something you love doing and let that energy permeate, enter into wherever you stop that. Well, I'm happy to report to you that she's not triggered by that trauma now. And it took her several weeks of practice to slowly move it. But what I had thought would be useful, because of the power of Ericksonian hypnosis, she said, that's not useful to me, and I could hear it. And I didn't have to be in control. I wasn't in charge. I was getting feedback, just information. That was not the best thing that we could create. And so then I had another idea, and we tried it step by step, and we modified it, and it then became possible in a form that she could use. And she's dissipating the trigger of the trauma. As that dissipates, we can eventually look at that trauma in a more implicit way. And we never go back to get information about trauma because it's all contaminated anyway. But the power of the Ericksonian position is to go close enough to the real trauma when she's able not to be overwhelmed by it, because every time your client gets overwhelmed by touching into the trauma gets stronger. Catharsis is not a good thing. It's to be avoided. When I was trained 55 years ago, everything was catharsis. It is not a good thing. It causes more trauma. And there's a huge amount of information about that. And Erickson said the same thing. You don't want a catharsis. Slow always works. When the client and the therapist, the Ericksonian therapist, is gentle with them and with themselves, the therapy becomes even more powerful. This is all common sense. This is all humanity. This is all Ericksonian. And we can go back so that She's close enough so she can experience that trauma, but how should it have been? Because Erickson pointed to the way to what we know, and this is neurobiology and neuroscience now, and his work is based on that as well. We know that what you imagine, believed in imagination, is perceived by your brain and central nervous system as real. It is real. So since it's real, if you allow the client to imagine how it should have been, and then you evoke in them, and you're connected to them all the time you're doing this. I'm not just doing this. I'm with them. You'll hear in a lot of Ericksonian's videos, and my voice goes with you. I am with you. How should it have been? Every person who has had trauma knows how the trauma should have been. They know what the parent should have done. They know what should have happened. When they recreate that, and then in our training and methodology, which I'll talk about in a second, you take the time for that to consolidate. That's why slow always works. They've done this in trance, they come out of trance, you talk about it, you give them time, and then it goes back into memory. It replaces the old traumatic memories, and then everything has to realign itself in relationship now to what should have happened. I was doing a demonstration with a client, and it was clear that she had a lot of trauma. And the demonstration went very well, but one of my students came up with me and said, but why didn't you work with the trauma? It was so clear that there was some abuse that had gone on with the father, and she was in a demonstration, and you should have just gone right into the work. Absolutely not. The power of Erickson's work is preparation, preparation, preparation. This is a demonstration. I don't know if she has what she needs to handle the trauma. In the Ericksonian work, you learn to build in resources, because exposing them to the issue and they don't have resources, you create more of a problem than they originally had. And I said to him, but why would I move quickly? He said, because she's suffering. I said, and she's going to suffer more if you move that quickly. And she's in her first session with me in front of a group that she doesn't even know. And she's trusting me. If I betray that trust, then I'm creating her ability to reconnect to the trauma in a negative way. How about some self-compassion? She's going to need self-compassion for whatever happened, and we don't know the details. So does she have resources? Has she developed the ability to have self-compassion? You don't open Pandora's box if you don't really know if you too have the resources. So one of the things, when I said I'm going to talk about methodology, because methodology is a way of teaching you not only the strategies, not only the philosophy. You are not Ericksonian until you think like Erickson, until you become that implicit tuning fork, the vibrational resonance within yourself and the client. I was a colleague and co-taught and supervised Betty Alice Erickson with her clients as well. We were together for 28 years until her very death. She, and I know so much about her father, I didn't study with him. He was dead. By the time I became interested in Erickson's work, I was busy studying with Jay Marino in psychodrama. I was very interested, and I became the head of the Gestalt training because I worked with Laura Pearls in New York City in those times. But I know a lot about her father. Her father knew everything and did everything that I'm saying to you, and so did Betty. When I said, but he never conceptualized it in a way that we could teach it, and she said, yeah, but I don't either. Protocol. He didn't want protocol. He didn't want protocol. I've got to tell you that they knew how to do it. They did it. When you watch some of his videos of his sessions, and I have a number, and I got to watch Betty many times, and she worked on me, and I did therapy on her as well. They embodied it, but it wasn't about, we don't want to teach you protocol. They didn't know how to put it into words and a methodology so that we could develop ourselves into thinking like Erickson, being an innovator, being creative. As I said, being a pathfinder, finding a way when there is no path, for the client to find the path that they need to travel, that they develop so that they become their own pathfinder. So it's taken me many years and lots of clinical experience to conceptualize Erickson's work and the work of Ericksonians, because I've studied with any number of them as well, and develop a point-by-point methodology that you can use to develop within yourself the skills that came to Betty and the skills that came to Milton Erickson just naturally, because that's how they evolved it. Luckily here at ACT, I'm questioned by my assistants and by Eduardo as to why I do things and what it means and so on. So I've had to take some very deep look inside to acknowledge, okay, this is why it's so powerful, but what am I doing and how do I teach that to you? Only the client has the power to change their life. No matter what form of therapy I've ever practiced, I know that only the client has the power to change their life. And Ericksonian hypnosis and the power of the Ericksonian hypnotherapist is you can create the environment, the relational field, so that is possible. And I also want to point out that ultimately, by the end of your training, you will have something that's so powerful that it's taken me years to believe it. And that is that when I'm doing my best work, I am in trance. I am using the power of my non-conscious mind, which is 95% of how we change, to connect to the power of the client's non-conscious mind. And I'm observing this, and you will be taught how to observe and be in trance. And so I'm using the brilliance of the non-conscious experience to help find the way, the path that the client can construct and use to liberate themselves from the issues that keep them from being all they were meant to be. I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to continue to meet with you and talk to you at various times about some of the fantastic possibilities that I want to teach you, the methodology I want to teach you. If you're willing to make yourself available, I'm willing to take the journey with you. It's a great journey. It's changed my life, and I've had years of all these, everything else I've had therapy in. I've been a client in everything else that I've learned, and very helpful. I can tell you what was helpful and what wasn't, but the Ericksonian relational field has brought me into, I think, one of the most positive, joyful, productive, and powerful times in my life. And I want to share that with you.